John Herren, right here. Call sign, Jolly Roger 6. Company commander, B Company, 17 Cav. This was the assault company. John, take it away. And we're gonna keep everything really tight because these guys, they want your questions. We want to have a lot of engagement, and that's your tasker.
As the assault commander, I moved in and my company had the job of securing the landing zone because we had to bring everybody else back in. We couldn't get the whole battalion in, and we couldn't even get all my company in on the first lift. And so that was my job, and my platoons fanned out and covered the landing zone, and then we captured a prisoner. And he said the North Vietnamese were up in the mountain, not too far away, and they wanted to kill us. And that got Colonel Moore's attention quickly. And he said, John, get your platoons and move towards that mountain. So I called my platoon leaders and I said, the closest ones to me were the 1st and 2nd platoons. So they were the lead, the 1st platoon on the left, the 2nd platoon on the right. My 3rd platoon was over in the far southeast of the landing zone. So they were going to be the reserve. So we take off. And the first thing that happened was the 1st platoon ran into some small arms fire. And they called me about that. And they were deploying. And the 2nd platoon then moved up on the right, and the commander of that platoon was a lieutenant. All these lieutenants were brand new, but most of them had been through airborne and ranger. He had been with the company for a very short time. And so they were not that familiar with their own sergeants and platoon sergeants and what have you. But they were good troops. And so the 2nd platoon, which was led by a very aggressive lieutenant who said he wanted to win the Medal of Honor. And so he ran into about 3 or 4 North Vietnamese that were in the jungle, and they were scouting around. And so he said, I'm gonna go get them. And I said, okay. But I wanted him to maintain contact with the 1st platoon after this excursion. And so, although I had no idea that this lieutenant was going to charge after him with the whole platoon. And he had just married up he had gone around a clearing, and he had just married up with the 1st platoon, as he was supposed to. And one of the sergeants and the platoon sergeant in the 1st platoon says, hey, where are you going? We're going up there towards these guys. There's supposed to be 5 NVAs in there. And so off Herrick goes. And all of a sudden, not very long after that, he ran into a firestorm. And I think he ran into the first elements of besides the ones that had started firing on the 1st platoon, he ran into probably a company, maybe from a battalion, that was looking for us, was looking for that landing zone. It was because, I think for the North Vietnamese, they felt that they had to get to the landing zone so we couldn't reinforce and what have you. It became a very brutal fight. Herrick, the lieutenant, called me back and said, we're in trouble, they're going around our flanks. And I said, grab a piece of terrain and defend, which he did. And shortly after that, I get another call, and he said, we're really taking fire, we need help. Now, the only thing we had my own mortars who were firing in support of him. But that wasn't stopping the enemy, and it was hard to gauge where they were. We didn't have coordinates on exactly where that platoon was. So then that became quite a fight, and that caused me to to give my full attention to the 2nd Platoon. I was on the radio and what have you. And so, as that particular action continued, fortunately, as I think you heard yesterday, a sergeant by the name of Ernie Savage was able to take over the radio after the platoon leader was killed and the platoon sergeant. And he was able to get the radio, and he started calling in artillery by just having them fire them, and he would see where it hit. He'd say, "You're too far out," so he'd move them in closer. Now, Ernie Savage was quite a guy. He was a E5, and we learned back in Benning when we were doing training, Colonel Moore would come around, and when he got off a helicopter, and he would kill the platoon sergeant. He'd say, "Who's going to take over?" And so that's what Ernie Savage was doing. He was the only one that could get to the radio because of the fire, and that's what he did. And he kept that platoon alive. And there were a couple other people that were really involved in that. There was a machine gunner who had fought in Korea, and he was helping the platoon get into that defensive position. And by firing, and the last thing he said, he yelled out was USOBs, and they swamped him. They killed him and all his squad, his team. The other one was a medic who I put in for the Medal of Honor, who was crawling around from then on. He was wounded. He was passing water around to the different troops, and really upped their morale. I interviewed everybody in that platoon right after the battle, and they were all saying, "Doc Lose," that was the medic, deserves the highest medal. So I put him for that, and I put in Ernie Savage for a Distinguished Service Cross, which he got. So that was my main focus in that battle. I think that platoon stopped the North Vietnamese, or drew their attention to a degree where they weren't able to get to the LZ as quickly as they wanted to. And I think that probably saved the battalion in some respects as far as getting more individuals in. So that's it.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that so personal story, John. And as your mean moderator, John got extra time because he was also making sure and taking care of his battle buddy who couldn't be with us today, Ernie Savage. And so now we move on to Tony Nadal, and I know that you all were here yesterday and had a great overview, so we're gonna lickety-split through everybody, but Tony Nadal, call sign, Fire Chief 6.
Gary Owen.
There you go. Company Commander, A Company, 17 Cav, the 2nd Company in.
There's a couple of points I'd like to make. The first is John and Bob had been commander of the companies for about a year and a half when they went. I've been commander of the company about 30 days. And that drove my behavior because I had two goals. The first goal was to accomplish the job I was given to do. And the first specific mission I had was to help John go and reach that platoon. More on that. Before we even got to that point, as John has said, the platoons would come in by platoon, and then there'd be a gap in time while the choppers went and got the other platoon. So my first platoon in ended up near the creek bed, close to the mountain, and they got in fight right away. So then we had an open gap, and I'd have to run back to the helicopter pad, the landing zone, and pick up the next platoon and put it in place. My third platoon came in, and it so happened that I ended up next to John, near his CP. And John looked at me and said, "You better get down or you're going to get killed." That caught my eye. the mission initially was defend, and then Hal Moore called and said, you and John go out, get that platoon. Now, the point I made about being in command for 30 days becomes important to me at this time, because my psychological outlook was I have to prove myself to these soldiers, and I have to earn their trust, and I have to be competent. So, and by that time, Joe here had been attached to his company, and Joe can speak of his own activities, which were
Fire Chief
obviously
6.
significant.
I'm going to have to interrupt you just to give you a heads up that that you're going to have to be wrapping up here soon, so we can get to
I'm gonna have
everybody
to
and
wrap-
get to the questions.
Okay, if you wrap it up, I'll wrap it up sooner. My outlook was I have to prove myself to the soldiers. So therefore, I got my guys together in the creek bed. I gave them a pep talk. I said, we have our buddies are out there from B Company. They're doing this and that and the other. We have to go get them. We have to bring them back. I said, fix bayonets and follow me. And I led the assault, myself and my command group. First guy at the creek, which was stupid. I was trying to prove, and I did prove it. And to this day, and these guys can attest to it, the guys I led hold me in high esteem. But I'd gone 70 yards or something, and a machine gun opens up. Visualize 5 people. I'm here. One radio operator's back here. Here's my coma chief, forward observer, and his radio operator. Machine gun opens up. This guy drops dead. This guy drops dead. This guy's dropped dead. There's 2 of us left, myself and the guy behind me. Now, how the hell did that happen? And because I'm running out of time, I can't tell you the rest of it.
That's a tease for you all to be able to catch up with these gentlemen tonight at the reception and at the gala, and that we have lots of question time. Thank you so much, Tony. And next to Tony, as you know, because I'm sure that you were here for the Medal of Honor presentation earlier, Joe Marm, call sign, Fire Chief 26, platoon leader, 2nd Platoon A Company. His platoon was attached to B Company in the attack, trying to reach the cut-off platoon. Did I get that right, Bob?
Right.
Thank you.
Because Bravo Company was 1 platoon light, my platoon was assigned to to Bravo to help to get up to that platoon. We didn't make it. We were taking a lot of casualties. So we pulled back, and we started the main assault with B Company and A Company. And I was back attached to my A Company. And B Company was still light 1 platoon. And as Captain Nadal, Colonel Nadal now said, you know, he suffered a lot of casualties, but he wasn't wounded, luckily. One of the company runners came over to me and said, the company commander's been wounded, you're in charge. I said, boy, just like in Ranger School, they put you in charge in a very critical time. So I went over to the command post and found out that he was still there. He hadn't been wounded. I missed the first word of that in the heat of the battle and all the battle noise. If the company commander gets wounded, you're in charge. So he was still standing, so I went back and took over my platoon again. And we were charging ahead, trying to get up to that platoon, but we didn't make it that day. And one in front of my position was a machine gun position, a big rock anthill. And I charged it and wiped it out with a light anti-tank weapon called a law. And then I moved ahead and and told, and I tried to get one of my men to do it, but he thought I meant throw him a grenade from where we're at, and he did, and it deflected because of all the trees and shrubs around the position. So rather than waste any more time, because it was starting to get dark, I charged ahead about 30 meters and threw a grenade over the top and went around to the left side and silenced some more bad guys that were trying to kill us. And when everything was pretty quiet there around that bunker, I told my men to come on, we got to get to the platoon that was trapped on the side of the mountain. And that's when I was wounded. Someone further in the back, not from that bunker, because I was standing up. A lot of our casualties from the 79 killed and 121 wounded after 3 days were upper body wounds because we were standing up trying to shoot them and they were trying to shoot us. But it kind of ruined my day. I was shot in the jaw and evacuated by one of the helicopter pilots, probably Bruce Crandall. His call sign was Snake 6. His co-pilot and the other chopper was Ed, too tall to fly, Freeman, because he was a big guy, about 6'4", and they were great pilots. And later on, they were awarded the Medal of Honor also for their actions. It's the only battle in Vietnam where there were 3 Medal of Honor recipients from one specific battle in the Army.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Joe.
Okay, Bob Edwards, call sign Hotwire 6, Company Commander C Company 17 Cav, the 3rd company to land at LZ X-Ray.
My call sign pretty much describes my character. Hotwire 6. Colonel Moore said I was smart. I'm bragging about that. I spoke directly to the point, and I'm going to do that this afternoon. I don't have time to tell you about the actions of C Company in the 2 days of battle. What I'm going to focus on is getting you interested enough that you will read the book.
This book, right here.
The movie, I already told you, you wasted your time to see that. Best thing came out of the movie was the hymn, Mansions of the Lord. Joe Galloway and Hal Moore, when they started to write the book, their goal was to find as many men who survived the battles of X-Ray and Albany and interview them and tell their story. Took them 8 years to do that. They made 2 trips to North Vietnam to get the enemy side of it, and I think they nailed it. Besides telling soldier stories, the book is a Bible on leadership, both good and bad. Now, C Company. Colonel Moore said that on C Company defeated the most serious attack of the day. On the morning of the 2nd day, and these are quotes, he said that after 2.5 hours of savage, sometimes hand-to-hand battle, C Company, performing with great unit discipline and personal courage, defeated an enemy attack, and by 10 a.m. the North Vietnamese were withdrawing. C Company started the day with 5 officers and 106 men. And after those 2.5 hours, there were no unwounded officers, only 49 unwounded men. And the bodies of hundreds of North Vietnamese littered the bloody battlefield. And I hope I can talk more when you ask your questions.
Thank you so much, Bob. I'm looking forward to introducing George Forrest. And I don't know your call sign, or else I just didn't get it from you. So what is your call sign?
Alpha 6.
Alpha 6. So, George Forrest, Alpha 6, Company A commander. His company, was attached, and it was 1.5 Cav, not 1.7. His company was attached to 2.7 Cav when they walked out of LZ X-ray toward LZ Albany. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Okay.
Yeah. What's the score?
How much?
Oh, okay. These guys were all 7th Cav. I'm 5th Cav, and I was attached. And if you are ever attached, you're treated with a great deal of respect.
You are a bullshit.
As denoted by my seating on the stage. I don't have I won't recount my battle. What I want to do, though, is to tell you, this morning I was in listening to Joe Marm, and one of the questions that was asked is, how do you deal with the grief of your losses? I lost 17 young, who knows what these young people could have been. They could have been the doctor who found the cure for cancer. They could have been the next great Miles Davis. But I failed them into bringing them home. So the answer to the question is, you live with it and you try to deal with it. I'm open for questions, and as the Marine Corps general who spoke earlier with Joe, he inspired me, and I wanted to go out and find a recruiting officer. But this is what you have to look forward to, is a walking stick, and there is a difference between a cane and a walking stick. Old guys have canes, vintage guys have walking sticks.
George, thank you so much, because when we had a phone call, you told me that the things that you learned as a second lieutenant have served you ever since. And I thought that was so perfect and the best way to set up for your questions. And we have secured a runner with a microphone who is, you're a runner today. So, this is your chance. We want lots and lots of engagement. You know that this is going to be, there we go.
Midshipman Liam Dunleavy, United States Naval Academy. As leaders, a big thing about our careers is making decisions. What's the time where maybe you made a bad decision, especially in the heat of battle, and what did you learn from that?
I didn't hear that.
A tough decision, a bad decision you might have made. Colonel Edwards, maybe. Didn't much time. Thank you.
You asked me that question, right?
Yes.
Okay. I have the answer, but I want to say one thing that George talked about. George lost 16 men, and I understand that he grieves their loss. I lost more than that, and I grieve that loss. But what George does not focus on is the fact that by running from a battalion commander meeting down the length of the whole 3 rifle companies, getting back to his company and putting those men into a defensive perimeter, he saved countless lives. And you got to remember that. All right, back to your question. My worst decision did not relate to the battlefield. As I was in the evacuation chain with Joe Marm, we got to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, and a nurse or a Red Cross lady came up and said, "Do you want your wife notified?" My reasoning was, if I say yes, they'll send her a telegram. And I thought, and if she gets a telegram, she'll think I was dead. I said, no. When I get to a phone, I will call and tell her. So I get to San Francisco, a Red Cross lady comes around and says, you want to call your family? I'm like, geez, I've been waiting to do that a long time. So she dials the number, she gets my wife on the phone, and she says, Mrs. Edwards, I have your husband here. And then pause. My wife thought, because of the news that she read, that the Red Cross lady meant I was in a box. So she didn't say anything. Finally, the Red Cross lady said, well, do you want to talk to him? It took me a long time to work through that bad decision.
The worst decision that I ever made, I have 4 sons. My youngest son, that's not the decision. Maybe I need to clean that up. He was a freshman at VCU, and he called me one day and said, Dad, I'm leaving school to go on the road with a band. And I said, hell no. The band that he was going on the road with is Dave Matthews.
Next
Oh,
question.
you don't know Dave Matthews? Come on, guys. Oh,
They're a little younger than we are.
You all know who's in Blowfish or from where. No, wait, that's Dave Matthews. Yeah, I'm getting them all cross-pollinated. You have the microphone over there, and
Yes,
we just
ma'am.
want to make sure that, I'm just Alex, but thank
the hell
you,
did you shut
that
up?
everybody hears it nice and loud.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Midshipman Smith from Miami University of Ohio. Being one of the more hand-to-hand, really brutal parts of the war, how did you maintain command and control in that battle? And with a lot of young officers dying and a lot of casualties happening, how did you maintain that command and control and the morale to keep fighting?
I can't hear him. Can someone else speak?
Yeah, I got that.
You go.
No, hey, wait a minute. Other folks can answer too.
I know, but, all right, will you tell about the importance of Colonel Moore's training program about substituting? Go ahead.
No, I wasn't there for that. Remember?
Yes, no?
All right, yeah, we've worked it out.
Okay.
One of the most important things Colonel Moore did when we were training at Fort Benning was he would come up to a platoon leader and say, you're dead. And that became then the next senior, in this case, platoon sergeant job, to step in for that leader. And that worked, as clearly demonstrated by the performance of Ernie Savage when he took over that cut-off platoon. You fight the way you train, and Colonel Moore from Korea had the experience and the sense to train to what to do when the leader gets wounded or killed. Any other comments?
Yeah? No?
Well, I want to finish a bit of what I had started.
There you go.
And that was, I told you that I think I led the last bayonet charge by the American Army since the Korean War. But I said it went too smart. And the consequence of it was that I was out there, but in a way that was good, because we weren't going to make it, and B Company wasn't going to make it. And when I gave the order for my company to withdraw, I stayed out there. Myself and the other survivor, we stayed out there, and I was calling artillery fire, doing it myself because I couldn't get on the battalion fire support net because John had a really good FO, and he was using up all the frequency for that. After my guys got back, then I came back. That's what I wanted to say.
I thank you for saying, because I was going to say when I heard the question about, hand to hand, et cetera, it was like, oh, Tony, I was going to prompt you. Yeah, and how about you, John?
Howdy, gentlemen. I was just wondering, at some point I imagine for your enlisted men, panic set in. How did you enforce discipline to keep them on the line?
What did he say?
What was the question?
Can you,
You repeat.
Among your enlisted men. So how did you keep them in line, given that scenario?
Well, I'll say something. Because I had commanded my company for about 15 months, and the last few months were in Vietnam, I knew every NCO and a lot of the men that were in those platoons. I trusted those platoon sergeants and squad leaders. And I said, if we have a problem, and this went on this before we went to Vietnam, but if you have a problem, you got to talk to them and figure it out and, take care of it. I don't want to get involved unless it was really serious. And of course, when we were in Vietnam and in the fight, it was serious. But the platoon sergeants were the ones that my platoon leaders were listening to in the case of all, except Herrick, who was somewhat of a problem for his platoon sergeant. But that platoon sergeant, this tells you how much he thought about the men. That platoon sergeant re-upped 2 days before the battle, and he was killed. So I think it's the fact that you have to trust your people and then let them go make the decisions within their units and take care of the problems that pop up, even in combat.
I see a question over here. Oh, I went backwards. We're going that way, sorry.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Cadet Wilson from the Citadel, and I wanted to ask about your guys' esprit de corps. Did your pride in the regiment come before or after the battle? And how did you build it if it was before?
What was the question?
About building pride, building esprit de corps. It was
How about
after
the
combat or going through
the,
this kind of
marches
thing.
and Saturday morning parades? Well, one thing Colonel Moore did right away was he called all the company commanders and said, you're going to get top ratings from me, but you got to prove it. And then he said, one thing we're going to do, we're going to have Saturday parades, and we're going to be competitive. And so each of you should try and win that, because that'll give you, I guess did he give us a day off? Or
I wasn't there, remember?
Yeah, Bob was in it. Bob and I competed very heavily in that parade. And so that was a way that you built esprit and morale between the units. And okay.
Well, one of the things that Hal Moore said, and these guys know better than I, was there would be no second place trophies in this battalion. When he took over the battalion, companies have display cases for the athletic events or the best company of the year or whatever. If you got second, that went away. You either won or you weren't. So that got imbued in the troops.
And you really don't have to worry about esprit, because the battle blooded my unit. And so the little things that I used to have to harp on them about, cleaning your weapons and making sure you have enough water and whatever, because after the battle at the Ia Drang, we didn't go back to base camp to rest. We went on to another battle at Bong Song. So there was no time to feel sorry for yourself.
Joe, you said you wanted to say something about this, about building brotherhood.
The unit had been training together for a long time in the Carolinas against the 82nd and 101st. And they had sergeants from World War II and Korea. So we were very, very fortunate to have such great troops. My second tour in '69, it was all shake-a-bake. They were instant NCOs. They would go to a 3-week course and come out as an E5 after their basic and advanced training. And so we lost a lot of the NCOs as we progressed in Vietnam from 65 to 75, where there were over 2 million soldiers servicemen and women that had served in Vietnam over those 10 years. Thank you.
Question over there.
I'm Cadet Victoria Gergis from VMI. My question is, what are some lessons that you learned as young leaders that you hope that this generation of leaders can benefit from?
What were the lessons that we learned as young leaders?
Yes. Maybe tough lessons that you learned as a young leader or mistakes that you made that you hope that we can benefit from.
I think any one of us could answer that question. I'll start it, but certainly they can. First of all is you've got to demonstrate to them that you care about them. That sounds pretty simple. It's not always easy to do, particularly in garrison. It becomes more apparent in combat that you care about them. And one way you show that is by being proficient in your profession. Don't waste soldiers' lives because you don't know what you're doing. The soldiers will know quickly whether you know what you're doing or not in combat. And if you don't know what you're doing, what happens is an informal chain of command develops where they hear you, but they don't listen to you. They listen to the platoon sergeant over here, or they listen to whatever. You don't want a duplicate informal chain of command developing in your unit. So, be proficient. Talk to them. Talk to them. Let them know what's going on. Keep them informed. When you give an ops order, include, if you're a platoon leader particularly, you don't have to only talk to the sergeants, you can talk to the whole platoon. Say, here's what we're going to do. You know your role, whatever. Just show them you care and show you know your job.
The best lesson that you can learn is self-maintenance. Take care of yourself, both physically and mentally, so that you're prepared to take care of the troops. Because if you're not physically fit, and if you're not mentally there, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And this works in relationships, and raising kids, and in school. If you don't do self-maintenance, you're going to go down the tube in a heartbeat. So self-maintenance.
You go.
Do I get
for it.
another shot?
You absolutely.
I was sidelined a minute ago by Tony because he's senior to me. Right. Set the example. Show soldiers, airmen, seamen, whatever, that you care about them. Correct their mistakes in private, but congratulate them in public. And here's one that you don't have any control over, but a unit the longer a unit stays together and works together as a team, the more proficient they become. And the 1st of the 7th went into Vietnam with a huge advantage over other battalions because John and I and the battalion commander and most of the senior NCOs and squad leaders and the battalion S3, the operations officer, we had trained and been together for over a year. We knew instinctively what the other guy was going to do. And that sounds like, that's bullshit. It's not. The longer you can stay together and work together, the better a unit will be. And then on a side note, I'm going to be at the meeting or the gala tonight, and whoever buys me a drink can ask me any other question they want.
And in fact, we have chance for one last question. Are you sure? Otherwise,
you hear from me again.
I know that you all have so many things that you wanted to share with with all of these fine folks. Oh, we have one last brave soul. You know that no question is a stupid question.
We got one more right here.
Yep.
Cadet Colton Buck out of BGSU. It's a bit of a selfish question because I'm writing a paper right now, but in your opinions, following LZ X-ray and LZ Albany, was air power more of a support or a hindrance to your plans on the battlefield?
Air power was not only a support, it was essential. We wouldn't have survived without air power. And air power comes in two forms. It comes in fixed wing, and it comes in rotary wing. The lesson I learned, we had a FAC on the ground, a young lieutenant, former F-4 pilot, and I know in the Air Force there's no job that nobody wants less than to be a FAC on the ground with an infantry battalion, which is okay. But this kid was good. He didn't like it, but he did it well. We had aircraft, fighter aircraft stacked from 2,000, I think, he said, to 30,000 feet. Because there was a code word in Vietnam that if you called a flaming arrow, that means it's a battalion-sized unit of the U.S. Army or Marine Corps in dire need. And every aircraft in the air that had a load of bombs was supposed to come orbit over that spot. And the conversations that was related to me by the FAC was, you know, some airplanes can loiter a long time, others can't. And so F-100 didn't have much legs, and the pilot would call, well, I've been here for 30 minutes, I'm running out of gas, and I want to drop my bombs now. And the other guy would say, no, hell, I'm an F-4 pilot, I got more gas, but I've been here longer. Whatever, but the most effective aircraft was the A-1E. It came in not too fast. The pilots were more accurate, dropping the weaponry. Today's A-10, right? Yeah. Today's A-10 is a great aircraft. And the Air Force wants to get rid of it, and the Army's going to say, no, but hell no. Because the F-35s and F-22s and whatever aren't worth a crap for close air support. But it was essential. And that night they were dropping flares to keep the place lit up.
Well, and the other thing about air and ground, I mean, it's one team, one fight. And did you want to add one last thing? No? Here we go.
The artillery was a key also to that battle. My FO, fortunately, was really good. And he's the one that worked with Ernie Savage in getting that artillery around that platoon for the rest of that afternoon. And there were no other casualties after that first couple of hours of the fight because of that artillery. And he kept calling in at night. He would call me and he'd say, some guys come in through our area, we're gonna get some artillery. And the FO would hear that and boom, you know, they would hit a area that they thought these guys were coming in. So artillery was key. We had not only the 105, but we had 81, we had the big ones. What were the?
We have 105s and 155s.
Yeah, 155s, and then we had the 8-inch?
8-inch, I think
8-inch.
later in the fight.
I remember being in the trench, probably the first night in the trench there, or in the creek area, and this shell came in, this fragment came in right over me and hit a tree, and it was big, and it had to be 8-inch. So sometimes they don't get them in there.
We had two aircraft coming in with napalm, and one hit very close to us, and we lost a couple of soldiers, and General Moore called off the other napalm plane. So,
yeah. Can I just say one? Excuse me. This is a lesson for the grunts. When we had to pull back, I called for white phosphorus. And when that stuff comes out, you know the chemistry of white phosphorus, or you should. When that stuff comes out, the smoke is so thick and so heavy, it stays on the ground, gives great cover. The battlefield, plus if it gets on your skin, it's got to burn right through you. So the battlefield became quiet. the bad guys got hit with WP, and they stopped shooting, they stopped talking, they started running.
You put them to ground.
One last comment. Yeah.
How about we
And
all
with-
get one last comment?
This is why y'all need to catch up with all these gentlemen, because they really would like to share their stories with y'all, but you go ahead, George.
Okay.
My heart is warmed because I'm sitting here looking at the future of the military.
Absolutely.
And you young men and women, we need you, particularly at the time that this nation, the crisis that this nation is going through, the polarization, the military leadership, you're here. And I'm begging you, stay the course, stay the course, stay the course, and help us old guys grow gracefully and contribute to Social Security.